everyone and welcome back to Mariana Mass Books. My name is Mariana and today I am here with a quick recommendations video for Shorty September. If you're watching this video in the beginning of September, I am away on a trip. I should be in Scotland at the moment, so I wanted to pre-film a quick video to leave it on the channel so it wasn't without videos for 2 weeks, since its recommendations just assume that I love all the books that I'm talking about, so that I won't go on tangents to tell you how much I love them, and I just stick to what the book is about, etc. So, without further introduction, let's just go ahead with the prompts. I'm going to start with the summer cookout shorts, which is read a book and then cook or eat something that goes along with it. And I'm going to pair this one with the Rockstar Jorts prompt. I am then going to give you another recommendation for that one, but for now I'm going to pair it with those two because this book works with that one and also with the Jorts prompt, which is the jean shorts. So the Rockstar Jorts is a book, read a book and then pair it with a song or an album, and the jean shorts is read a book that was published in the 70s or 80s. And for all these three prompts, a book that works perfect is Battles in the Desert by José Emilio Pacheco, which is a Mexican modern classic written in the 80s, set in the 50s in Mexico City. It follows two young boys and their friendship, and then some drama because one of them falls in love with the mom of the other. So it is that story that you are following, but it is set in the 50s in Mexico City, in a time when American culture was starting to permeate in Mexico. So there is a lot of exploration of the culture and the politics at the time, and just like everyday culture. Therefore, there is a lot of mention of food, and there is like a contrast. The story of the two boys is kind of used to do the contrast of traditional Mexican culture and the American culture that is coming into the country. And so with that with that contrast between the two friends and the cultural elements of the two friends' lives, there is a lot of talk about traditional Mexican food and also American food. And so you could cook or eat any of the foods mentioned in the book. But then also, because it is such a famous modern classic, there is a really big Mexican alternative rock band called Café Tacuba, who actually did a song based on this book. The song is called Las Batallas because the book is called Las Batallas en el Desierto. So you could read the book and then listen to the song. Las Batallas is not my favorite Café Tacuba song, so you could listen to the Café Tacuba greatest hits. And then also, because of the cultural aspects, there is a mention of other music. I think in the beginning paragraph there is mention of a really popular song at the time. So a lot to take from the book, and yeah, as I said, that would work for those three prompts. Then you have the half and half shorts, which is read a book and then watch the movie adaptation. And for this one, I'm going to recommend a book that I thought didn't have an English translation, but according to Goodreads, it does. Either way, it is translated to many languages, and I know there are people who speak different languages because we are from all over the place here, all over the world here on BookTube. So the book is originally in Italian, but I have seen translations on Goodreads in Spanish, French, German, Arabic, and you can look if there is a translation in the language you speak, and that is Novecento by Alessandro Baricco. This was written originally as a monologue to be presented on stage, so it's not quite a play per se, but it is written to be performed. So it's a monologue, and then you do have some stage directions, and it is a story of a pianist who is born aboard a ship, or rather a baby who is born aboard a ship and then becomes the pianist of the ship. When we meet him, he has never left the ship. He's an adult man, he's the pianist in the ship, and he has never been on land. And the monologue is done by one of the band members in the ship. So he is the one who talks about Novecento. Novecento is the name of the pianist. The movie adaptation is called The Legend of 1900, starring Jeffrey Rush and other famous people. It is an amazing movie, just fantastic. There are some amazing scenes at night, in a storm, in the sea, with a piano, and there is a piano battle that is super iconic. So I really recommend that one, and I feel like it's lesser known, so I wanted to recommend it. Oh, I skipped the leopard print shorts because that is a book that you have seen someone read out in the wild, so that's very personal to everyone. But I mean, you could pick any of the books from this list for that prompt in your TBR. Then we have micro shorts or Taylor Swift shorts, and for this is read a poetry or a book with a breakup in it. I'm going to recommend you two poetry collections that I adore. One is called Side Effects May Include Strangers by Dominik Parisien, I want to say. He is a Canadian poet, and this is a poetry collection that explores illness. I think the author has a chronic illness, and so the poems explore his illness, the pain, the procedures. There is a poem about MRIs that it spoke to my soul. I have an MRI every year, and I hate them with a passion, and that poem is just perfect. It is contemporary poetry, so if you don't like contemporary, maybe this isn't the poetry collection for you. If you do like poetry, contemporary poetry, highly recommend this one. I do have a Poetry Thursday video where I read a couple of poems from this collection, so I'm going to link that video down below. And then the other one is called A Whale is a Country by Isabel Zapata, who is a Mexican poet. This one I think is a recent translation, and I am super excited. I was very excited to see that it was going to be translated because this is one of my favorite poetry collections of all time. This is a poetry collection about animals. Every poem is a different animal, and I would call it also contemporary poetry. It is, I would think, very experimental. There are poems that are just lists of facts of animals, and I really love that because it really, without saying anything, it makes you realize the poetry of nature, because there are some animals where instead of actually writing a poem, she just lists facts about them, and when you read those, they are so poetic in themselves that it's like there is no need to say anything, just the animal, the nature is a poem in itself. So I love this poetry collection, and as I said, super excited that I can now recommend it in English, and so that would be my recommendation. Then you have the Jorts prompt, which I already recommended you a book for, and then it is the Rockstar Jorts prompt. So I already recommended one, but I'm going to recommend another because it's my favorite book from this year, and if you watch my TBR video, then you already heard me talk about this book. This is You Dreamed of Empires by Álvaro Enrigue, which is a weird historical fiction book. It is a psychedelic comedy about the Spanish conquest with an alternative ending, so there is a bit of like a revenge story for the conquest. But it is super weird and super trippy. The first half is very normal, and then the second half is very trippy. And while the book is set during the 16th century, so the 1500s, the time of the conquest, there is a scene where someone takes mushrooms and they start hearing a song by the band T-Rex, which I think is a 70s band, I think, and the song is called Monolith. So this person in the 16th century takes mushrooms and starts hearing Monolith by T-Rex, like in his mind, in their mind. So you could read the book, which I highly recommend. I have talked about it ad nauseum in my channel. You can check out a lot of my videos and I talk about them there. If I remember, I will link down below. And then you could listen to Monolith by T-Rex, and then you could go ahead and listen to a whole album or more songs by them, which is what I am planning to do. Then we have Zip Off Trousers, and that is read a book with a title that could be shorter. And I'm struggling with this prompt other than non-fiction. Like, I feel like non-fiction has long titles anyway. And for this one, I'm going to recommend you another book from my TBR, and it's actually a non-fiction book, and it is Lifeboat number 8, Love, Loss, Something Else, and the Sinking of the Titanic? Something like that. I always forget the full title because it's very long, because non-fiction has long titles. I can think of other fiction books with really long titles, but they are not shorties. Again, not shorties. So I'm going to go with that one. A super amazing 60 something page book, page turner if you want to read it, and long title. So there you go. Also, I super love super long titles. I love them so much. If I see a book with a super long title, I'm immediately interested in it. There is a middle grade book called The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making. That's the first that came to mind, but it's not a shorty. So like that long title immediately grabs my attention. I love it so much. I think it's because I also love long run-on sentences. That might be it. In literary fiction, I either love super short sentences, just short sentence period, or super long run-on sentences. The next one is paperback shorts, and that is buy a book and read it. So again, I'm not going to give anything for that because you can buy any shorty you want and read it. If you wanted to buy any of the recommendations on this list, I highly recommend them and you can add them to your TBR. Then we have a supermarket 2-pack shorts bundle, and that is to read a non-fiction shorty and pair it with one of your fiction books. And I love non-fiction. I have read a lot of non-fiction. I think most of the non-fiction that I read is either almost 300 pages or more, and also it would depend on the books that you choose because you have to pair them. But I mean, from this list I recommended Lifeboat number 8, so that is a non-fiction. If you look for maybe like a mystery thriller set on the Titanic, you could pair it with Lifeboat number 8 or something like that. And just in general, as a recommendation, I would recommend essays. I love reading essays. You can find individually published essays that would work for a shorty, or an essay collection that is very short. In my TBR video, I talked about more nonfiction, so you could go watch my TBR for some shorty nonfiction books. Then we have New Metal Shorts, read a book that mixes genres. My favorite mix of genres is historical fantasy. I adore historical fantasy. And when I say this, I always go on this spiel to clarify that I don't mean generic medieval fantasy that is not actually medieval. While I love traditional medieval fantasy, I don't consider that historical fantasy because it's vaguely inspired by the idea that we have of a time period, but it's not. It's more inspired by other medieval fantasy than by medieval history, if you know what I mean. So historical fantasy for me means that it's like historical fiction, where the author thoroughly researches a time period or a character, person from history, and then they write a fantasy story about them. But it is research and pretty accurately historical, while adding fantastical elements. There are different approaches to historical fantasy. I'm not going to go on a rant about historical fantasy. The book that I want to recommend you is a short story collection, and I'm not a short story person. I don't like short stories. So the fact that I'm recommending this should tell you something, because this is one of my favorite books, and the first short story in this collection is one of my favorite fantasy stories, period. And that is Ars Historica by Marie Brennan. This is a collection where there is a mixture of historical fantasy and historical fiction. So some stories have fantastical elements and others don't. If you are not a fantasy person, let me just tell you something about Marie Brennan's approach to historical fantasy. She doesn't like to use magic to explain events in history where we know that there was a human being behind that event. So, like, if a general makes a decision and then wins a battle, she will never write a story about that where a wizard gave him a potion to win the battle. What she does is that she takes history's mysteries or things that are iffy or that we don't know what happened, or a battle that was won because of bad weather, things that are not humanly made, and that's where she includes fantasy. And also, there are some stories that are not fantasy, they're just historical fiction. She has a really fun story based on a LARPing session with friends, and then she wrote a story that was one of my favorites from the book. So anyway, one of my favorite books, and this works great for this prompt. And then finally we have Shorts with Pockets, and that is read a book that on the cover that there is something that could fit in a pocket. And I don't have a book recommendation for that specifically because that depends. There are a lot different ones, and I think that's one where either you can find a book in your shelf or in the library or bookstore, or you can watch other TBRs to see what they picked. I didn't think of anything, and I'm filming this off the top of my head. There is also a mystery thriller prompt, which I skipped blatantly because mystery thriller is not my genre. For this one, I would say you recommend a book to me based on the fact that I like history, I like fantasy, I like historical fantasy, I like... yeah, maybe a historical thriller or a historical mystery. That would be fun. Anyone has a recommendation? Put it on the comments. And that would be it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I managed to film this really quick, although not as quick as I wanted, but still quicker than I am usually. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you when I see you. I'm currently away on a trip. I will see you when I get back from my trip. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a nice week. And in the meantime, I wish you happy reading.